I, 29 male, learned a very specific lesson about entitlement a few years ago. When someone shows you they believe the rules of basic decency simply do not apply to them, believe them immediately. Do not wait around hoping they will change. I waited, but only long enough to ensure my exit strategy was completely flawless. My ex, 27F, worked in high-level corporate public relations. Her entire career was built on spinning narratives, managing optics, and controlling the flow of information. Unfortunately, she brought that exact same skill set into our apartment. If I brought up a legitimate grievance, she would spin the conversation so fast that I would somehow end up apologizing. If she forgot a major milestone, it was actually my fault for not reminding her properly. Over the 3 years we were together, her ego inflated to a point where she genuinely believed she was untouchable. She always had to be the smartest person in the room, treating everyone else like extras in her own personal movie. I work as a forensic accountant. My day job consists of tracking down hidden assets, finding discrepancies in massive data sets, and generally living in a world of absolute, verifiable facts. We were entirely incompatible, but it took a jarring, deeply disrespectful moment for the blinders to finally come off. It started on a random Tuesday evening. I was sitting at our kitchen island, reviewing some case files, when I noticed her constantly smiling and giggling at her phone. It was past 11 at night. When I asked who she was texting so late, she gave a heavy, dramatic sigh, as if my mere existence was an exhausting burden. She told me it was Coworker. Coworker was a vice president at her PR firm. He was also married. She claimed they were just brainstorming a crisis campaign for a client. When I pointed out that sending heart emojis at midnight didn't look like corporate crisis management, she absolutely snapped. The argument escalated quickly. She didn't even try to deny the inappropriate nature of the texts. Instead, she attacked my reaction to them. She paced around the living room, waving her phone in the air, telling me I was hopelessly insecure and controlling. She claimed her charm and her ability to flirt were corporate assets, tools she actively used to climb the ladder. I sat there and remained completely calm, which only seemed to infuriate her more. She desperately wanted a reaction. She wanted me to yell, so she could play the victim. When I didn't raise my voice, she stopped pacing, looked down at me with absolute contempt, and delivered the line that ended our relationship right then and there. "You are so pathetic," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You rely on me for everything social. You're completely dependent. Honestly, I could cheat right in front of you, and you'd make excuses just to avoid a confrontation." I stared at her for a long, silent moment. The silence stretched between us. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was clinically detached. A switch had just flipped in my brain. "Try me," I said quietly. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and walked into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. She thought she had won. She thought my quiet response was just submission. She fundamentally misunderstood who she was dealing with. I hate public scenes, and I despise unnecessary drama. But I do not avoid confrontation when it is required. I simply prepare for it meticulously. That night, while she slept, I began auditing our shared life. The apartment was entirely in my name. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, and the internet. She only contributed to groceries and her own car payment. Legally, she was a month-to-month tenant. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly prepared. I called a locksmith and scheduled them for a specific date. I ordered 3 highly discreet, motion-activated security cameras and installed them while she was at work, one in the entryway, one covering the living room, and one pointing down the hallway. I knew that when the hammer finally dropped, a PR professional would immediately try to rewrite history. I needed objective, undeniable reality on my side. I spent those 2 weeks quietly moving irreplaceable family heirlooms and important hard drives to a secure storage unit. Around her, I acted completely normal. I made her coffee. I asked about her day. I set the stage perfectly. 2 weeks after that argument, her PR firm hosted their annual winter gala. This wasn't a casual office mixer. It was a formal black tie event held at a downtown museum, complete with an open bar, ice sculptures, and an aggressive amount of corporate networking. Plus ones were invited, and X insisted I attend to play the role of the supportive, successful partner. She wore a stunning red dress and demanded we arrive exactly 45 minutes late to ensure she made a grand entrance. The absolute moment we walked through the double doors, she detached from me. She immediately began working the room, leaving me standing by the coat check. I grabbed a club soda from the bar and found a quiet corner near the jazz band to observe. It didn't take long for Coworker to materialize. He was a tall, overly groomed man in his late 40s, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my car. He handed her a champagne flute, and the physical dynamic between them was instantaneous and undeniable. They stood way too close. He touched the small of her back. She leaned heavily into his shoulder when she laughed. I watched them for an hour. X would occasionally look across the room, make eye contact with me, and then pointedly turn her attention back to Coworker. She was testing the boundary. She was waiting for me to walk over, cause a scene, and look like the jealous, unhinged boyfriend in front of her bosses. I stayed exactly where I was. I just sipped my club soda. Around 10:30, the crowd began to thin out as the older executives went home. The music got louder. The lighting dimmed. I saw X and Coworker slip through a set of heavy glass doors leading out to the museum's east balcony. I gave them exactly 3 minutes. I walked across the room, my footsteps heavy against the marble floor. The balcony doors were slightly ajar, letting the cold winter air spill into the heated room. I didn't step outside immediately. I stood just inside the glass. They were pressed against the stone railing. It wasn't a quick, drunken kiss. It was aggressive, heavy petting. Hands under clothing. Complete disregard for where they were or who might see them. X opened her eyes and saw me standing on the other side of the glass. She didn't freeze. She didn't push him away. She looked directly into my eyes and a slow, arrogant smirk spread across her face. She held my gaze for a solid 5 seconds before closing her eyes and kissing him again. She genuinely believed I would turn around, walk to the parking garage, and wait for her in the car like a beaten dog. She thought her brag from 2 weeks ago was a prophecy. I turned around, but I didn't go to the exit. I walked straight to the DJ booth. The DJ was a younger guy, scrolling through his phone while a playlist ran. I pulled a crisp $100 bill from my wallet and placed it directly on his mixing board. "I need the microphone for 30 seconds, I said. "Emergency announcement for the hosts." He saw the suit, saw the 100, and handed me the wireless mic without a single word. He faded the music down. The sudden silence in a room of 200 intoxicated PR professionals was deafening. Conversations halted instantly. Heads turned toward the center of the room. I stepped right into the middle of the dance floor. I saw Boss, the CEO of the firm, looking at me with severe confusion. I tapped the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the interruption. For those who don't know me, I am X's partner." I kept my voice perfectly level, projecting clearly across the room. "Actually, correction. As of 3 minutes ago, I am her ex-partner. I just wanted to make a quick public service announcement. If anyone needs to speak with X, or if Coworker's wife is trying to reach him, you can find them currently hooking up on the east balcony. Please drive safe and enjoy the open bar." I handed the microphone back to the DJ. I didn't run. I didn't storm out. I walked calmly toward the coat check, retrieved my overcoat, and walked out the front doors into the cold night. My phone started vibrating before I even reached my car. I turned it off entirely. I drove to a nearby hotel where I had already booked a room. I knew my apartment cameras were running 24/7, so everything was secure. I turned my phone on the next morning at 8 a.m. I had 74 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The texts ranged from furious demands asking where I was, to blatant gaslighting claiming I was insane and had embarrassed her for no reason, to aggressive threats saying she was going to destroy my life. I drove back to my apartment at 9 a.m. Her car was in the driveway. I unlocked the front door and walked in. She was pacing the living room, still wearing the red dress from the night before, her makeup completely smeared. She looked absolutely feral. The moment she saw me, she launched into a massive tirade. She screamed that coworker's wife was demanding a divorce, that boss had suspended both of them pending a massive HR investigation, and that her entire career was in jeopardy. She demanded I call boss immediately and say I made the whole thing up due to a manic episode. Her entitlement was so deeply ingrained that even as her world was collapsing, she fully expected me to lie to fix it for her. "I'm not calling anyone," I said, pulling a manila envelope from my briefcase. I placed it on the kitchen counter. "This is a formal 30-day notice to vacate. Under state law, your month-to-month tenancy is being terminated. You have exactly 30 days to remove your belongings." She stared at the envelope, her face turning a deep, mottled purple. "You think you can kick me out? I live here. I have rights. I will literally call the police right now and tell them you hit me. I will get a restraining order, and they will force you out of your own house." She reached for her phone. I didn't even try to stop her. "Go ahead," I said, leaning casually against the counter. She dialed 911. She put it on speaker. When the dispatcher answered, X's voice completely changed. The aggressive venom vanished instantly, replaced by a trembling, terrified whimper. She claimed she was locked in an apartment with her abusive boyfriend, that I was screaming at her, that I had threatened her life, and that she was afraid I was going to kill her. The dispatcher told her officers were en route. X hung up, looked at me, and smiled. It was the ugliest, most sinister thing I had ever seen. "You're done," she whispered. Then, to really sell the scene, she picked up a heavy decorative vase from the side table and hurled it directly at the 80-inch television mounted on the wall. The screen shattered in a massive spiderweb of broken glass. She started tearing books off the shelves and knocking over lamps, deliberately creating a scene of a struggle. 10 minutes later, heavy knocks pounded on the front door. 2 police officers stood outside. The exact moment I opened the door, X threw herself onto the floor, sobbing hysterically, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He went crazy," she wailed. "He smashed everything. He said he was going to hurt me." The officers immediately separated us. One officer took her into the kitchen to get her statement. The other officer, an older man with a very tired expression, asked me to step onto the porch. He asked me what happened. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't seem frantic or nervous. "Officer," I said calmly, "I am the sole owner of this property. I served her with an eviction notice a few minutes ago because I caught her cheating at her company party last night. She threatened to file a false domestic violence report to get me removed from my own home. When I told her to go ahead, she called 911 and then proceeded to destroy my television and my living room to stage a crime scene." The officer looked at me highly skeptically. "That's a wild story, son. Her story is that you snapped and trashed the place." I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the security camera app. "I know. That's why I installed hidden cameras last week." I played the footage from the living room. The high-definition video clearly captured our entire conversation, her exact threats, her fake crying on the 911 call, and her deliberately smashing the television with the vase while I just stood there. The officer watched the video twice. His skeptical expression hardened into absolute fury. He radioed his partner in the kitchen. "Hey, cuff her." The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut over X's wrists was the most satisfying sound I have ever experienced. She stopped her fake sobbing instantly. Complete confusion washed over her face as the second officer began reading her Miranda rights. "Wait, what are you doing?" she shrieked, struggling against the officer's grip. "He's the one who threatened me. You have to arrest him." The older officer walked back inside, holding my phone. "Ma'am, we have high-definition video with crystal-clear audio of you threatening to file a false report, making the false report, and intentionally destroying property. In this state, filing a false police report is a Class B misdemeanor, and criminal mischief for destroying a television valued over $750 is a Class A misdemeanor. You're going to county." Because the destruction of property occurred in a domestic setting, it triggered an automatic domestic violence protocol. As she was hauled out of my house, screaming and cursing my name, I officially requested an emergency protective order. Under state law, because she was arrested for an offense involving family violence and property damage, the magistrate granted the order the very next morning. The order legally prohibited her from coming within 500 feet of me or my residence for 60 days. Her 30-day eviction notice was now a completely moot point. She was legally barred from returning to the property at all. Her mother had to coordinate with local law enforcement to arrange a civil standby just to pack up X's clothes and furniture a week later. But X's entitlement still wouldn't let her accept defeat. 2 months later, I was served with legal papers. She was suing me in small claims court for defamation of character and illegal eviction, seeking the maximum allowable limit of $10,000. We had our hearing in front of a county judge. She chose to represent herself, which was her first major mistake. She showed up in a sharp business suit, radiating arrogance, and launched into a prepared speech about how my malicious lies at the party had caused her to be fired from her 6-figure PR job. She argued that she was a victim of a targeted harassment campaign to ruin her life. The judge, a no-nonsense woman, with zero patience for theatrics, looked at me over her glasses. "Your response?" "Your Honor," I said, handing 3 thick folders to the bailiff. "Truth is an absolute defense to defamation." Included in those exhibits are the sworn affidavits from 3 separate coworkers who witnessed the public affair on the balcony, as well as the termination letter from her employer, which cites a violation of the company's morality clause for engaging in inappropriate conduct with a married superior on company time. Furthermore, regarding the eviction, she was removed from the property by law enforcement and subjected to a magistrate's order of emergency protection due to her arrest for domestic violence and property damage. I then provided the official police report and the original receipt for the television she destroyed. The judge reviewed the documents for less than 3 minutes. She looked up at X, who was suddenly looking very pale and very small. "Ma'am," the judge said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You committed perjury, you destroyed this man's property, and you had the audacity to waste the court's time because you are upset about the consequences of your own actions. Your claims are dismissed with prejudice." The judge then looked at me. "I see you have filed a counterclaim for the destroyed television." "Yes, Your Honor." The replacement value was $1,500. "Granted," the judge ruled, banging her gavel. X walked out of that courtroom owing me $1,500, carrying a criminal record, completely blacklisted from the local PR industry, and living in her childhood bedroom at her parents' house. Coworker didn't fare much better either. His wife filed for divorce the week after the party, and he was forced into early, quiet resignation to save the firm any further embarrassment. Sometimes, people tell you exactly who they are and exactly what they plan to do to you. When they do, don't make excuses for them. Let them play their game, but make absolutely sure you control the board before they even make their first move. If you want to learn more survival tactics on how to legally outsmart an entitled ex without breaking a sweat, hit that subscribe button before your partner gets any bright ideas.